letting his tongue hang out. She was displeased. Usually he was sensitive and didn't mock people. Maybe, being a doctor himself, he felt threatened by psychiatry, this strange, almost mystical practice that the Church kept trying to ban and forbade its members to have anything to do with. Freud was a Jew, however, and so was David, which surely should have made him have sympathy with, or at least understand, the thinking that psychiatry was based on. But maybe that was a foolish assumption. Today was slow so far. The thumbsucker had been in first thing, with his aggrieved and accusing stare. Then there had been a harassed woman with her feral 10-year-old son. Then a shady man in his 60s who, although he was dressed in slacks and a sports shirt, had the definite air of a priest. Why did priests, when they tried to disguise themselves in ordinary clothes, always give the game away by wearing white socks? It was as if, through old habit, they had to have some sign of sanctity about their persons. Now it was nearly lunchtime, and the next patient who was due, Mr. Jolly, that really was his name, hadn't appeared yet, although he was down in the appointments book for 12:30. Mr. Jolly liked to chat, and had told Phoebe all about his problem, which was that he couldn't resist beating his wife, even though he claimed to love her dearly. There had been occasions when Phoebe felt Mr. Jolly wouldn't need to bother going in to see Dr. Blake, since he had already poured out all his most intimate troubles to her, here in the waiting room. In the end, Mr. Jolly didn't turn up, and at 1 o'clock Dr. Blake came out and told Phoebe that, since there were no more patients due today, she could take the afternoon off. It was not unusual for Dr. Blake to let her go like this, which was another nice thing about the job. The doctor was in her early middle age, a large, handsome woman with untidy hair, prematurely flecked with grey, which Phoebe was convinced she cut herself. No hairdresser would have let her leave the salon looking like that, like a ragged and tipsy page boy. Her husband, a surgeon, had died not long ago in a car crash on the Nace Road. She was taciturn, but not unfriendly, and she rarely smiled, though when she did, she was transformed. She had a broad, soft face and strikingly large, almost black eyes. Her manner was slow, and she had an air of faint melancholy that Phoebe guessed was congenital and not due to her recent bereavement. She wore tweed skirts and floppy silk blouses and sensible flat shoes. She was what Phoebe imagined she herself would be, one day, except, she hoped, for the hairstyle. Phoebe put the plastic cover over her typewriter, wondering if Mrs. Jolly was getting an extra beating today, and if that was what had delayed her husband. In fact, she suspected there was no Mrs. Jolly, except in Mr. Jolly's fevered imaginings. The day was hot, but there was a cool breeze coming down from the mountains, the pale outlines of which she could see far off, past the end of the street. She walked along by the green railings of the square, savouring the smell of cut grass. The petrol mower had already been going when she arrived at the office that morning. At the bottom of the street, she turned left and walked along Merrion Row to St. Stephen's Green. She hadn't been to the country shop since Jimmy Minor's death. It was the place where she and Jimmy used to meet. Now, as she went down the steps, she recalled fondly how he would come rushing into the cafe and fling himself down at the table and launch straight off into a scurrilous story about some politician or businessman, heedlessly dropping ash on the table while his tea got cold and his sandwich began to curl at the corners. Poor dear Jimmy, beaten to death one dark night and flung into the canal like a dog. She sat at a table by the window and ordered tea and a ham sandwich in Jimmy's honour. She took out her packet of Goldflake and her lighter and put them on the table. She had taken up smoking again, she wasn't sure why, on her last day at the hat shop. She wasn't a real smoker and hardly inhaled at all. She just liked the image of herself sitting on her own at a cafe table with a cigarette and a book, looking mysterious, or at least interesting. She had always been solitary, and was so still, even though she was going out with David Sinclair. He was solitary too. The result was that they were never really together, only side by side, like two trees growing close by each other.